Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Tokuskai Inside Look podcast, where I share inspiring stories of budoka around the world. Please share your favorite episodes with your dojo and community so this effort can be spread to more corners of the earth. This episode is brought to you by our amazing patrons over at Patreon. By donating as little as a cup of coffee to a bowl of ramen, they've directly made this podcast possible. If you're enjoying this work and can spare a small tip each month, it would mean a lot to me. I'll also be sharing the occasional behind-the-scenes clips and side initiatives that build on this podcast. You can find it at www.patreon.com/Tokuskai Canada. Thanks in advance for your support. And now, on to the interview. So we're together because I realize that there's a lot of interrelation between the things that we do in the dojo, concepts in the martial arts, and everyday life. And I actually feel that unless we bring some of it into the everyday life, or we bring some of everyday life into our art, it's not sustainable and it's also not as useful. I like that to make it interesting. In this case, food is something that's pretty universal. So I found Sida and Aurelien, who regularly post some amazing photos of their cooking. So I thought it'd be a good chance to bring up some topics, and then we'll discuss that in some topics that are related to our practice, and then we'll discuss that in relation to cooking and food and all that. So with that, maybe before we get into topics, why don't you just give a little background of how you got into like really cooking and making it like something that's not just throw together sustainable meal, but something that you can demonstrate, something that has quality. So since Sida was here first, why don't you start?
So how I started cooking, I think, is purely survival. Like when I moved out of my parents' house, I had to learn to cook for myself. And because I love food, I just want to cook stuff that I actually want to eat. And a lot of it is actually learned from my dad, who was the cook of the house. I guess, like, with social media and everything like that, you start to look at what you're cooking from a third party perspective. Like, is this presentable? Can I get likes? But mostly it's like, if you put enough effort into it, it's something that you would like to share with everybody.
So that means like your dad like paid a lot of attention to making a good meal, or did you see that from social media or like watching food shows or like the tasty things on Facebook?
Yeah, no, my dad, like me, we cooked more than nicely, you know what I mean? We cooked the food that I guess he himself grew up with. And yeah, I mean, the presentation, just, you can always make something look nice in a bowl or on a plate.
Okay. Aurelien?
Well, my family are quite big on cooking. I'm actually the worst cook in my family. Both my parents are amazing cooks. I would probably rate my mum just slightly above my dad, and then my brother's just slightly below them, and I'm kind of the bottom of the skill tree in my family. And when I first moved out for university, because I was so busy with study, with training, and then eventually I started working as well, I didn't really have time to cook. So back then I was one of those people who lived on instant ramen more often than not. And the extent of my cooking ability was being able to not burn pasta. That was as good as I could be at the time. And even then I wasn't 100% successful at that. So it was only a few years later I kind of got really sick of living on such sort of basic, bland, not hugely interesting in terms of taste food, that it sort of kicked my ass into gear, and I started researching how to cook and different cooking techniques. My first go-to person to or source of information about how to do that was my mum, obviously, and my dad as well a little bit. And the rest has been just sort of teaching myself and seeing what works and what doesn't, and sort of experimenting with everything I do, and also looking online. There's some great stuff for some great, not just recipes, but also hacks for how you can do something better or do something faster as well. So these days, it's kind of a big part of my my evening before I go to training or after I get back from training. I always make sure to cook something nice, and I've got pretty good as well at sort of doing quite complicated recipes very quickly, because I get back quite late. So it's easy. Yeah. I've been able to sort of streamline the whole cooking process and just do something nice and quick in like 15, 20 minutes, half an hour, and then eat immediately.
So I want to get into the organization and structure of like the kitchen to do something like that. But first, where do you guys get your inspiration from? Like you mentioned, like your parents cooked, but now like you're probably making your own dishes. Do you like see things in restaurants or on TV, or where do you come up with whatever you feel like cooking in the time?
Yeah, I would say the things that I know how to cook that I like are mostly from my parents and grandparents, the things that I've grown up with. Sometimes I would go to a restaurant, I would think something's amazing and then maybe try to recreate it, but it's not something that I regularly go back on to cook. So like my comfort foods and the ones I guess that I post are mostly from my childhood. Even if it's like a bowl of sashimi or something, it's always something that has a relationship to what I used to eat as a kid as well.
Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, it reminds me of like these cooking shows where you have to make a dish, but you also like to have to convince the judges that there's some kind of connection, like you have a story behind the food. Interesting.
Yeah. I've done the same thing with the kind of food I really kind of go back to, and are all my favorite foods are the foods that I've learned how to cook from my parents and the stuff that I was kind of raised on. Conveniently also, it's a lot of those are, if you've got leftovers, they're actually just as good reheated after you just put them in the microwave and take them out and eat them. They're just as good as if they're freshly cooked. So sometimes I make a huge batch of something and then put it in a bunch of Tupperwares, and then heat up the next day or even a week later, and it'll still be just as good as if I just cooked it.
Wow, so that takes some skill. Like usually re-microwaving stuff that's been in the fridge. There's actually this recent Netflix show that we've been binging on called Best Leftovers. So the competitors have to go in and they're given these different leftovers and they have to reimagine it in a new dish.
So they're taking stuff that has already been cooked, and then they're trying to make it edible again. Yeah,
for example, like there's this one holiday special where it's like a Thanksgiving meal, these like Western Thanksgiving turkey, stuffing and all that. So they give you like a Tupperware that's like 3/4 finished and it's been in the fridge for maybe a day or so. So like either like the salads are fully soggy because like all the water and the tomatoes have leaked out, or like the stuffing would be super dry because like the fridge extracted all the moisture. And then they have to just they're given like some extra ingredients, but then they can add in. Anyways, I thought that this was interesting when like I might be forcefully bringing patterns from like this cooking into the martial arts, but I think there's little stuff that exists. In this sense, like both of you mentioned that your parents are big inspirations for the kind of food that you cook. Similarly, most of us, like what we all here do Iaido, you two do Jodo, and probably a lot of how we interpret the techniques also come from our own senseis. Like we look at them and we're like, oh, I like the way that they do this, so I'm gonna do it that way. So that's kind of a segue into some of the topics that we're gonna discuss today. So I guess the first one would be kind of related to that sense is hierarchy in the kitchen and in the dojo. So we know that the hierarchy exists for a few reasons. Basically, in culture, well, at least from my perspective, from my experience in organization design and stuff like that, you need hierarchy because you need to have someone make decisions, and sometimes you need to make decisions quickly. Sometimes you need to decide, you have to make decisions on the path or the direction you want this organization to take. Otherwise, you just get pulled into different pieces. You'll be inefficient and you'll be attracting like different people. So it's hard to stay aligned. So in that sense, hierarchy in a dojo is important. Now, yeah, so your guys' experience with hierarchy and then hierarchy in the kitchen, and talk about like your own feeling about that. Actually, since Sida started the last couple ones, why don't Aurelien, you start on this one?
Well, in both the kitchen and in the dojo, I'm kind of really super chill. I'm not hugely sort of super strict about seniority, hierarchy, where everyone stands and everything like that. It's also, I should add that one thing that is kind of, it's a benefit, but it's also it's kind of a double-edged sword in that the dojo I train at, I am not the sensei. I'm far from being the senior most person there. There's a bunch of people above me, so they have say over where people stand, what people do, etc. So generally, I don't have any sort of real responsibility, which kind of frees me up to do my own training. But it means I don't have that experience of, or my experience of imparting in the last couple of years, I've been given more teaching duties inside the dojo, but that's purely, I've been told this person hasn't learned this technique yet, go teach them it for a bunch of different people. But that's just an isolated technique. I'm not teaching them how to behave inside the dojo. I'm not telling them go stand there. I'm not explaining the rules to the dojo because everyone knows them already. But I'm more of a if I see someone doing something wrong, I'll just point it out to them kind of gently and say, you might want to do it this way. But for the most part, I'm just sort of very, very chill. I'm not very forceful inside the dojo. I just let most people get on with their training and just trust that everyone has the common sense and sort of Budo education to know what is done inside the dojo and what isn't.
So
and
I have a question.
That works quite well.
That's interesting. Like a couple of things. First, because you didn't start Iaido in that dojo, so kind of a foreigner in that sense. But also, like the other question would be like, if you were to give feedback to someone, how many ranks below you would you feel comfortable to just walking up to them, and at what point do you think that, okay, it's not my place?
It depends on whether we're talking about which art we're talking about, because there's a big I found, at least in Japan, there's a huge there's a very distinct difference in how people generally act in each community. The Jodo people tend to be a lot more relaxed, a lot more chilled, a lot more commonsensical about how to do things. Because I think partly that's because we have to deal with other people. We're not just training ourselves. We have a partner, we have a tachi that we have to work with. So we have to adapt. We can't just be sort of set in our ways and this is the way it must be, this is the way we must work. We need to work with other people. So Jodo people tend to be a lot more relaxed and open to doing things a slightly different way. EI is not so much that way. People in EI generally tend to be, no, it is this way, it's written down like that, so it is like this. And there's not really much room for discussion, generally speaking. Of course, I'm making huge generalizations about both communities, but this is the general kind of difference of mindset. So if I'm in an EI dojo or during EI training, I would only give advice to someone who's like one dan below me. And even then, if they're really good, if I think they're better than me or as good as me, then I'll just like, no, okay, that's, unless it's something super technical, like if it's something that's in the Chakuganten and it's definitely not allowed, I'll go up to them and say, I notice you're doing that, just bear that in mind. And whereas for Jodo, I'm much more comfortable with giving direction to people my level, or even the level above. Sometimes if it's a technique that I've practiced a lot more than they have, then I'll be quite comfortable saying, to remind them that, oh, in this situation it's critical, or in this situation it's this is the next part of the technique, or this needs to be that way, or something like that. So it really depends on the art that I'm training in.
And then you're saying that like you're very laid back in the kitchen too. So you're saying that if I come up to you like a sauce that you had finished and I taste it, I'm like, I'm gonna add a lot more salt in this. You're okay with that?
Yeah, actually, that happens quite a lot. Because generally speaking, when I make, I kind of forget about salt and pepper. Quite often, I forget to put the salt and pepper in, which is the worst, possibly one of the worst things you can do in any kind of recipe. I never forget things like garlic. Garlic, I put a whole load of garlic in there, but salt and pepper sometimes I forget, and then and my girlfriend will come over and say, "That have you not forgotten something there?" Like, oh yes, right, yeah, salt. So yeah, I would be absolutely fine with that, and I think, and I kind of, the saltiness of a dish isn't the breaking point for me. So if something is a little bit saltier than I would like it, it's like, oh, okay, this is a new spin on a particular recipe that I didn't consider that it could add to the recipe. So I'm totally cool with that.
Cool. Well, before we move on to Sida, that's one thing that I heard recently on the show was if you over salt something, the best way is not to try to add water and lighten it up. Apparently you add some kind of acid, like citrus or vinegar or something, to help counterbalance.
We would add sugar.
Oh, sugar, yeah.
My family.
I'll remember that.
Yeah.
For anything I make is too salty, just add sugar.
Sida, hierarchy in the dojo and hierarchy in the kitchen.
Yeah, so the culture in Sweden is obviously very different from Japan when it comes to recognizing hierarchy and social status. So in my dojo, I am the leader, and I want to say that I'm not too bossy. You know, you can ask my mates, I guess, but we do have to teach newcomers the etiquette and everything else. So I'm teaching. We do have beginners training with another person, but I'd have to explain, you know, most things from how to bow to the advanced techniques. And in the kitchen, I'm definitely very bossy. I don't. I like to do everything by myself, and in my kitchen, I would say, if I go home to somebody else, if I go to another dojo, obviously you have to respect the things that they do over there. So when I went to Ishiro Sensei's dojo, it was sort of I didn't really know exactly how to do things, so I got told off sort of first time by Ishiro Sensei. Saying, no, you have to do the way towards the sensei first, and it was just. I just felt so embarrassed, but yeah, I mean, yes, I mean, I'm pretty bossy in my own kitchen, and I am used to being the leader in my dojo. So those two sort of can go hand in hand.
Well, what's an example of being bossy in the kitchen? Like just have everyone out and let me do this, or are there things?
Yeah, so if it's somebody that I know pretty well, I would tell them to just leave me alone and let me do this. But if it's somebody you don't really know and then they're doing something wrong, I would just, I will be silent for a bit and then ask them nicely, like, can you just dice the onions a bit, please, something like that. or I just still like, go have a glass of wine. I can take over, please. Yeah.
Yeah, I can picture you like the person's dicing is like, these onions are only half a centimeter. They need to be exactly 0.35 centimeters. Do it again.
No, I'm not pedantic. That's a different thing. I'm bossy in the sense that I prefer things. I want some kind of control, some level of control in my own kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
If it's messing up, it's me that's messing up, and then I would apologize to everybody. That was my fault. I always want people's feedback on the food. Positive feedback, of course. Don't say anything bad about food. Yeah. But.
No, that controller actually reminds me of another thing where I would go to this omakase sushi, and if you're at the counter, then you have to eat it as soon as they like put it in front of you. And it's actually been a point because like the temperature of the fish and the temperature of the rice, you need to have that contrast. You don't let like the fish warm up or the rice cool down. So like it's been a point where we're at an omakase and then we're sitting there and we're chatting, and then like the pieces in front, and then they were like, hey, you need to eat this now. So yeah, I could see like having control over the kitchen and the food also means that like you can provide the designed experience for the person eating it.
I think it's also from my upbringing, because mom would say like, okay, it's dinner time, and then you'd have to be within 5 minutes by the dinner table when the food is still warm, and then you eat it at its optimal temperature, I guess. So if I prepare a meal and then I say it's time to eat, and somebody's like, oh, let me just do this first, I'll be like, no, it's the food is here now.
Oh, I have lots of struggles in my household to get everyone at the table to eat on time. Everything's always cooled down. And when I was growing up, my grandmother had a cowbell that she would ring, and it's like, it can't be anywhere in the house. Like whatever you're doing, you're not gonna be able to continue doing it with that bell ringing. Okay, so moving from we're still in the dojo. So we're talking, the next topic I want to bring up is cleanliness. So obviously if we're using swords and if the floors are not clear, you can easily trip over something and someone could get injured. So that's important. Safety is an important reason. The other reason is just clarity of your environment means clarity of your mind too. So I think that both are important aspects that are brought up in the dojo. And then, so in the kitchen, there's probably similar reasons as well. Sida, why don't you start with cleanliness in the kitchen and also cleanliness in the food that you make?
I can't say I'm the cleanest person, but I try to keep my kitchen area clean before I start doing something for obvious hygiene reasons. Most foods I do are either like wok or in a pan, so like I can mess up how much I want on the kitchen counter, but then everything is in the pan and it's being boiled. But I think the dish that I chose was the soft spring roll, where you'd have to use the kitchen surface to wrap something, and because it's like a white sheet of rice paper, obviously anything you have on the side on the counter would be stuck to the dish, and then I would just try to wipe everything clean before I start with this. But on the inside, it's, as you see, it's super chaotic. But keeping the surface clean is pretty important. In the dojo, again, like because in Sweden we don't have like our own building to use, so we're using actually a dance studio that we share with a school, I think, and it can't be compared to cleanliness when it comes to Japanese dojos or private spaces. So there we sort of, I mean, of course we have to, there's some kind of etiquette when dressing in the gi and hakama, and then we try to to not walk bare feet, outside of that area. But it's not something that we have. It's like we don't really clean the floor every time before we start. One, because we don't have any equipment to clean the floor with. So yeah, that aspect, it's probably not very high standard, but it's not. I mean, it's clean. But sometimes you get people come in, other people come in with winter shoes, and they grime around, and that's not very nice. But it's not people from our dojo that does that. Yeah.
So yeah, in the kitchen, it seems like it's a practical aspect of that. Like the spring rolls is delicate. It also, like the sheets also pick up pretty much everything. So if you want it to be done right, you need to be clean. In the dojo, it seems like safety is more important for the cleanliness, and then after that, like whether or not it looks good.
I think one parallel you would draw is to actually just check your area before you're doing something. So when it comes to yaojo, you have to make sure of the space. Obviously, if you see something on the floor, we remove it if it's like a piece of gravel or something. So in that sense, we just need to be aware of the space that we're doing something in. A few years back, Naginataka broke one of the ceiling lamps during the kata, and he got hurt really bad, but because the glass literally just fell down on him, and we had to, me and my hubmate Simon, we tried to clean up all the glass off the floor. There weren't any vacuum cleaners, so we had to like sweep everything by ourselves. But we missed something, obviously. So then the day after or the week after, during a kendo training, somebody, and it wasn't the first time. I mean, we've broken the ceiling lamps before, and we cleaned it up before, and then people have still afterwards they've gotten glass on their feet before. So that's not very nice. Yeah. So just check the floor.
And change the lamps.
Yeah, again, it's not our building, so we can break all the lamps so that there aren't any more obstacles in the building. Yeah. Cool.
Aurelien?
I think what I picked was ginger beer, which is not really cooking. It's more in the realm of brewing. Because ginger beer, you need the bottle or the container that you put the ginger and all the ingredients in to be completely clean and sanitized and free of any kind of leftover organic material. Because you're going to rely on the yeast that you're going to put in for a fermentation process to occur in there. And if there's other things that shouldn't be in there, then it can interfere with the whole process, and then you don't get ginger beer. You get more like ginger water, really. But in the dojo, in Japan is famously a very, very clean country. So generally speaking, and for Iya and Joe, where I train, it's a dedicated dojo that no one else has access to, no one else uses. So we have complete control over how clean it is, and it gets cleaned on a fairly regular basis. And we don't have anything as exciting as broken lamps and things and glass on the floor. Oddly enough, last Friday we were going to start EI training, and we'd just done kendo, and we looked at our feet and they're all black, and we couldn't work out why. They were just sort of really dirty, and I thought, what's going on? Why is it so dirty? And we still don't know why. But we then went round the dojo with like a wet cloth. Some of us like I don't know if you're aware that in kids dojos very often they'll have like a wet rag, and they'll run up and down the dojo with that and pushing the rag on the floor. So we did that a few times, which seemed to fix the solution, the problem. But cleanliness is, yeah.
Do you remember Totoro? My neighbor Totoro?
Yes, yeah, of course, yeah.
It's the Makuro Kurosuke.
We actually used to do that when I first started kendo in the UK. I was part of the kids class at the time, and that's how we would start every single training session, was doing that, because we shared the hall with it was a community center for and other sports used to use that hall, so that was our part of our warm-up, really, was to do that cleaning.
No, I was talking about the anime also had like mysterious black stuff that was on their
feet. Those ones, yeah. Yeah, that was the inspiration.
Yeah, you have some kind of spirits in your dojo. Do you guys have a choice of the next topic? Anyone you would want to bring up?
Any
really?
For me?
Okay, then I'll say, let's do patience. So patience in martial arts, obviously, especially the ones that we do, especially actually Iaido too, because it's generally something that you just need to do a lot of tournaments. There's no like feedback, or if you're fighting someone and knowing that, okay, there's this you have to work on. So in general, I think martial arts, it's just repetition over time. Like you could practice smart, like, you know, the saying, practice smart, not hard, or something like that. But even if you're smart, like, it just takes time. So what are examples of, let me see if I can come up with an example of just the practice. Okay, so I have an example. When I was about, 2011, 2012. So when I was about 8 years into my practice, just before I turned fourth dan, I was sandan. And I was feeling very kind of constrained at the dojo. I was like, I'm not able to practice the way that I want to practice. And I was almost gonna quit in some sense. And the only reason I didn't quit was because my wife was a lower rank and she was still kind of gung-ho about, no, there's a hierarchy in this dojo, you just follow what the senseis do, even if you're not happy with it. So my twin brother, who was practicing with me at the time, he left. So we had the same feeling. But because I had my wife to kind of keep me in, I stayed. And I realized that, like, there's so much I learned just from, in that sense, being patient with how the dojo was like being run, how my practice was. And I think that helped me in a lot of different ways. So definitely there's patience in the technique and the practice, but also patience in, like, with the environment and the dojo is important. So yeah, your experience with patience in the practice in the dojo, and then with a specific recipe. I forget who was first last time. Aurelien was first? Oh yeah, Sida. Yeah. So Aurelien, go.
Me first?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I actually had a very, very similar experience to you, Patrick, with, I'd just taken my IQ in Kendo. And back in the dojo I was at, we used to run inter dojo shinsa before you could get up. I think it was mostly for the kids. So I got I think the first one I got my fifth cue, and it wasn't you didn't have to go through every cue to get to Nikyu. You just do a shinsa, and the examiners would just think, okay, that's good enough for Nikyu. So the first one I did was Gokyu, and then the next one I got Nikyu, and then that sort of gave me the confidence to try for my Ikkyu. So I went for my Ikkyu and failed it. And then someone else who was watching, who saw my Shinsa, said to me, "Oh, you didn't pass because you went back once." And in Kendo, it's always about going forward, never step back. And I thought to myself, this is Ikkyu. I mean, this is, we're not talking Shodan, we're not talking Nidan Sandan or anything. This is Ikkyu. This is the first level for the national grading. So I thought, are they going to be this harsh on all the gradings? Like, and even just for Ikkyu? So I thought to myself, do I really want to keep doing something where they're going to be that harsh on you for such a low grade. And it kind of made me question why I was doing kendo, if I wanted to continue doing it. And it sort of made me reevaluate why I did kendo, what I liked about it, what I wanted to get out of it. And I realized the grade wasn't really that important. Like, it's all nice having this sort of nice big piece of paper, but that's not why most of us do kendo. And so that kind of taught me the perseverance and the patience to get in there, and even if you're faced with a setback like that, just keep on practicing, keep on going, keep on training, and keep trying for it. So that was my kind of similar experience with my first real setback in Budo. Well, first of many setback in kendo, or in Budo in general. That sort of mindset has been what's kind of kept me going throughout my entire Budo career. It's also the reason why I don't put that much stock in gradings in EIHO as well. It's like, okay, great, I passed. Okay, next. What's coming next? It's not really about those things. Mm-hmm. For the recipe I picked it's a traditional French recipe called bœuf bourguignon, and it's basically a beef stew, but it takes, and you generally won't find it in French restaurants, certainly not the fancy French restaurants, because it takes so long to cook. It's not the kind of thing you can just whip up after someone orders it in 10, 15, 20 minutes. It takes in total about 3 hours to 3.5 hours to cook. And this is one of the recipes this is one of the foods I grew up with that my mum cooked, and her bœuf bourguignon, to this day I maintain, I've tasted many other people's bœuf bourguignon and none come close to hers. Her one is just perfect. So she taught me how to do it. She told me what ingredients to do, how to combine them, how to cook them, how long to let it cook after each ingredient, and all the rest of it. And of course, the first time I tried it, it wasn't perfect, and it's still not quite as good as hers, but it's almost there. And I think the only reason it's not quite as good is because of the difference in ingredients, and because I'm living here in Japan, where the water's different, so the stock is different, the beef is going to be different, so it's kind of different in that way. But through patience of practicing it, doing it a bunch of times, and being patient with the process each and every time, with the amount of time it takes, and just thinking to myself, okay, after this, it's going to take 3 hours, but I will have an awesome meal at the end of it.
So practically, why does it take 3 hours? And what happens if you cook it for only 2 hours and then try it?
Certain parts of it won't be as well cooked. They won't be cooked at all. Some of them, the carrots will not have the right consistency. They're supposed to be quite soft. The beef, especially, as well, it's supposed to be basically to almost disintegrate and sort of break apart in your mouth as you eat. But if you don't cook it for long enough, then that won't happen. You'll end up with tough beef and not the right consistency generally.
So if this is something that your mom was making when you were growing up, you would be playing around in the house, and then you just know that it starts, you can smell it, and then you just know you have to wait for when you can eat it. Yeah,
that was one when I was a kid. You could have that smell coming, and you knew that firstly food was going to be coming soon. It was soon time for dinner or lunch, and secondly that it would be just one of the best meals possible, because I think it's possibly my favorite dish that she made. It's generally it's real soul food for me.
So do you eat that with rice, or is it just as is?
Traditionally, we in France generally you'll eat it with potatoes. and you can eat potatoes in any way, kind of boiled, steamed, or within sort of more complex form, like a gratin or something like that. But in my family, we generally ate it with rice, and we'd put the rice and then ladle in the bourguignon, and then we would sort of mix it in with the rice and create what we call the dog's dinner with the rice, and eat the whole thing together. And it was just the best thing. Like I've tried it since with potatoes, the traditional French way, but it's still not quite the same as with rice.
Cool. Sida, what's your experience with patience?
I don't have any patience. That's my experience. I think I always realize that something needs time after the fact of either getting frustrated or having tried something over and over again. I guess, I mean, in the dojo, I would get a bit frustrated if I don't get a technique right after 4 or 5 times. And then I would repeat it. And the next session I would think, oh, I didn't do that really good last time, so I'll just try that again and then see how it feels. And then if it didn't feel right, I'll just do it over and over again. And then the result would obviously be that it's taken a longer time and you've done something repeatedly and then you've improved at it. And afterwards I would think, okay, yeah, maybe, it needed this much time and this much practice to be good at something, which I didn't think about during the process, and I would just be frustrated. In the kitchen, I don't. I usually I try to make something that is edible within 30 minutes. But again, growing up, we've had like boeuf bourguignon. We have stews that take longer time, and then the broth I make also take a long time. But the dish I chose was pork knuckles cooked in soy sauce. It's sort of like a double patience thing, because first of all, it takes about 4 hours to cook the meat, which is on a bone, and you get all the gelatin into the sauce, and it would just cook really, really tender, and the bone marrow and everything would just and all the flavors gets mixed. But afterwards, you would have to wait until it's cool to eat it, because it's a cold dish. So it's supposed to get cold and harden, and then you slice it into thin pieces of like colorful meat. That's you have the skin that is dark, and you have the fat, which is light, and you have the dark pinkish meat in between. So it's like it's a nice dish to look at as well. So often I would just get impatient after I've cooked it. I would say, okay, it's been in room temperature for half an hour, I can cut it now, and then everything would just fall apart. Then back in the fridge you go. I'll wait until tomorrow instead. So then again, I learned after the fact I had to wait, and then I wait, and it works.
That's a helpful lesson, actually, because like for newer beginners or even kids, like you can just say, hey, be patient, but they don't really know what that means. So it's like experience failure, recognize that it took time to do something, and then you can say, hey, look, if you just wasn't that frustrated in the beginning and you knew it was going to take this time, then you can be patient.
I think for me, it's like if I know that this will take a longer time, maybe I will just lose the motivation to want to get it correct the next time. So I guess it's sort of a plus, that sort of frustration that just keeps me going, at least to try to repeat something over and over again.
Yeah, in some ways.
It kind of reminds me a little bit of when I had when my dad was visiting, and I made him, I introduced him to takoyaki, which is hands down one of my favorite Japanese dishes, just amazing. And I said to him, we'll buy the takoyaki, they'd be freshly made, or sensoji, and I said, wait a minute before you eat them, because when you let them cool down, you're going to burn your mouth if you don't. And did he listen to me? No, he just grabs a toothpick, goes straight in, and then immediately, because he didn't have the patience, he was just burned the inside. He actually couldn't swallow it because it was so hot. He had to spit it back out and had to throw it in the trash can. That was a whole takoyaki wasted.
Oh, the number of times I've burned myself on my own food because I'm too eager. And then the thing is, if you eat a hot broth and you burn yourself on the first time, you won't be able to taste anything, for a day. So
yeah.
Oh man, I like this morning I made this coffee like super quick, and I filled it to the brim. So I'm like, I'm just gonna sip off the top part just to make sure. I already burnt the tip of my tongue. Yeah. But this is a cool like I always thought of patience as something that like you just be like, okay, I'm gonna wait. And it's more of a feeling of waiting. But from our stories here, it sounds like as much as it's a feeling of waiting, it's also a feeling of being okay with frustration in the moment, knowing that in the future you're going to get something out of it. So like both for Aurelien and I, we've already felt like what it's like to be completely frustrated and realize that if we just waited and felt like what's afterwards, it's okay. It's actually better. So you build up that kind of habit of doing that, and you realize you can. So the next topic, kind of related to patience, is repetition. So I think I've already mentioned this in terms of our practice. So it'd be just cool about when we repeat, if we're repeating something good, that ingrains in our body, and then it becomes natural. And that's what we're aiming for in our practice. So repetition shows up in cooking as well. So Sida, why don't you start with your experience with repetition? If you have a dojo experience, talk about that, and then talk about the recipe.
Yeah, I mean, I think for everybody, the dojo experience, I mean, training is repetition in itself. You repeat, muscle memory and how you feel when doing something, what you've and looking at. If you have a video footage, trying to copy a sensei, repeat what they're doing. I've had numerous role models of senseis I tried to copy, and for competitions, for gradings, you try to do the embu in your dojo, you're repeating in your mind that it's another scenario, so that you're getting used to the feelings, and how you breathe and everything. So it's either repetition of the same thing over and over again, or you try to repeat in your mind, replicate another scenario, and then trying to train train on that in your mind. And in the kitchen, I picked dumplings, and for me, it's trying to recreate the taste and the feeling I got when I was a kid at my grandparents', during New Year's or Chinese New Year's, when everybody would get together and make dumplings. And we would be 5-6 people, even the kids are involved, and they would make hundreds of dumplings. And when we moved to Sweden, it was just me and my parents, and we would once or twice a month make dumplings. And it's everything from kneading the dough, rolling out the pancakes, I guess, the small fat dough. That takes skill with the rolling pin, using one hand to roll the pin and the other hand to maneuver the dough, so you get a round shape with like a little bit thicker in the center, and then getting the right amount of filling, and then kneading it together in an efficient way. I'm not saying I make like pretty dumplings, but I make a lot of them really quick. So, and for me here, it's more like the taste and then the experience of making it. So it's just basically putting your fingers together, I don't know, 100 times every time you're making dumplings, and then getting efficient at it. And that's the important part for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the nostalgia.
Yeah, it seems like once you're practiced in it, you can also be more efficient. So you're like, that allows you to do it quick.
Yeah, that was what amazed me the most when I was a kid. Like that they would roll out a dough in 5 seconds, and then the dumpling is done within the next 5 seconds. They were just like making things really quickly, and it's consistent and it tastes good. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I always enjoy going to like those Shanghai restaurants where like they have this big window, or Taiwanese restaurants, that dumpling ones. They have a big window in front of the kitchen, and then you can like see in how they're making each of the dumplings. It's just so efficient.
I would never be able to make dumplings for somebody else because I want it for myself.
Yeah.
I made this.
Yeah. All right, Aurelien, repetition.
Repetition. Well, I mean, that's kind of basically what EI and Joe is, the foundation of all our training, right? That's how we work on our techniques and how we improve them, and it's kind of the like I said, the foundation for improvement and for all three arts, like Iaido, Jodo, and Kendo. But it can be quite difficult to capture how someone else is doing something just from seeing them, or sometimes even if you've done it yourself and Sensei says, for this one, try to do this, and then you'll try it a few times, screw it up and not get it right, and then one time he'll say, yeah, like that, and then you try to recapture that moment, that lightning in a bottle, and you can't, because you weren't really, at least for me, I was thinking so much about what I was doing, but I wasn't really kind of feeling it. Like I wasn't taking full, being fully aware of what my body was doing and exactly how it was moving. So it's quite difficult to replicate, and you just have to keep repeating the same movement again and again and hope that it gets back to that.
It's like that. Like for me, sometimes, like I make the perfect dough for the dumplings, but then I don't really go with a recipe. Everything is from my parents, and then you feel, oh my God, this dough is perfect, or this filling is perfect, and then next time you fail completely at it, and then you just try to repeat until you get to that same feeling again.
Yeah, that's kind of the way. It's been quite frustrating for me asking my mum for recipes, because she's been doing them for so long that she never thinks about the ingredients to put in, how much of what. She just does what she likes to call the pifomètre, which is kind of like a French slang expression to mean you just have to kind of judge it by eye, or play by ear, kind of, really. So like I was asking her for, she makes really good crepes as well, and I asked her for a grape recipe, and she had no idea how much milk or flour she was using. She could tell me how many eggs because those are counted, but the flour and the milk, she had no idea. So I had myself try and repeat making the mixture multiple times before I worked out, and then I started doing it the same way. Like the way I make pancake mixture now, I can't tell you how much of each ingredient I put in, because I myself have perfected it just by looking and judging and going, okay, roughly this.
Yeah, it's funny. When we're watching some cooking shows that teach you how to make it. So in Canada or the US, when I see the shows, it's always precise measurements. But then when I was growing up as a kid, my grandmother would always watch these like Chinese cooking shows, and pretty much every ingredient is there's a term in Cantonese called "xích lượng," which kind of, I think it translates to an approximate amount. So like they're always saying, put this into it, approximate amount, and like approximate amount. It's like, okay, I can eyeball it based on what I see.
There used to be like this video from this this chef who like he would make something super complicated, but what he does is he's take this big soup ladle or whatever, and then he just picks ingredients with that. No idea how much it is, but you just know what he's using. But everything is like they go together, so just use an adequate amount. In Swedish we call it lagom, which means just right.
That's right.
You ask somebody, how much of this is just the enough amount.
Yeah, so that's actually an interesting, just parallel to our practice too, is like, if you were to, I don't know, certain dojos, especially how we're practicing in Japan, it's just like watch and then do. While like you find in more Western countries that are used to academics where like exactly this angle at this height at blah, 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 blah. And that seems like a parallel to cooking, and like just watch how the cook is doing it, see approximate amount and just try it yourself until you get it right.
Can I just pause 1 minute? I need to plug my my computer in. It's about to die.
Did you have any more in that? Did you have any more in that subject, or do you want to move on?
No, I think we can. I'm fine.
Okay. Let's go to, actually, since we talked about repetition, which is almost like we think about doing something simple over and over and over again, so it just becomes ingrained. So on the other aspect, there's simple things that you can elevate into something much more. So the topic is elevating simple ingredients into something that's more than what you think it is. So I think Sida started the last one, so Aurelien, you start this one. And I don't think did you send a picture for this one?
I think so, but it's more of a combination picture. It's got the recipe I picked was a maigret canard, and in the picture there's the maigret on the right, and then there's a gratin dauphinois which I made on the left. And there's two pictures. There's one where there's the whole dish of gratin, the whole duck, the whole maigret, yeah. And the one I picked for this one was specifically the maigret canard, which is, at least the way I cook it, is supremely simple. Like it's literally the duck, some salt and pepper, and that is it. You don't even use, when you put it in the pan, you don't even use any butter or any olive oil. It's just you put it on the pan with the fat side down, and you rely on the heat of the pan to melt the fat, which then sort of stops it from sticking to the pan. And it's just a fantastically simple recipe. Like I've seen other recipes where you add all kinds of different sauces to it, but my personal favorite is still just simple, just the salt and pepper seasoning, and then just cook it maybe a couple of minutes on each side, and then you have it. I'm also more of the when it comes to red meats, I'm much more of a rare kind of person. Like if it's still alive, that's just right for me, I think. So for me, with the duck, it's just literally maybe 2 minutes on each side, maximum. And yeah, it's just fantastically simple. Nothing super complicated. It's one of those things that I can just literally just put together in under 5 minutes, and there you go. And it's and as you were saying, it's kind of, you can do the same thing with certain techniques in EI and Joe. Like you can sort of play around with the timing and with the feeling of particular techniques, and sort of endow them with a whole new dimension.
Yeah, it's so interesting when I go to like I rarely get to eat like a full duck breast like this, and it's usually to a higher end restaurant, and like they charge insane amount, and it's actually just like they barely do anything to it. All they have to do is like zero a bit on the side, and
yeah, you do that at home and do it arguably better, I think.
I need to try that then.
I recommend it. It's really good.
Sida, elevating simple ingredients.
Yeah, so I picked different ways to cook eggs. I think eggs has been part of my staple diet since I was a kid, and I think it's one of the most versatile ingredients that you can work with. So in the picture, I on the top you have the Tamagoyaki. It's a Japanese omelet where you whisk the eggs and you heat it in layers at a time and you roll it up and you get this sort of firm texture with the way I make it. I put a bit more oil so you get these sort of oily in between. And it's a bit sweet and it goes great on rice. And then, and if you instead whisk the eggs, you add some water, add some salt, and then you steam it for about 20 minutes, you get the steamed egg cake, as we call it in the Mandarin, which is like a tofu-like texture. It's jiggly, and then you put some vinegar, black vinegar on top, which somehow heightens the flavor of the eggs a lot. Some sesame seed oil as well, and it just completely transforms the ingredients. And then at the bottom left, it's just like a normal omelet that's fried with some vegetables, and you get, like, if you put eggs, especially egg white, in really hot oil, it gets this crispy texture. Again, completely transforms the ingredients. And I like to, I really appreciate how how something as simple as an egg can be transformed in these ways to really give different experiences. And like what Aurelien said, a technique, depending on how you perform it, context, whatever, it can change its what you call it, the contact, the usability. Sorry about the messing up, but like I think adding to that, posture and facial expression sort of also add to what it is you're doing. So, like, I guess the vinegar on the eggs would be, a good mezquite or something like that. to add some flavor in what you're doing, because yes, you can do the correct techniques, but you need to put some love in it, some sort of personal touch to it, so it becomes more alive.
This whole concept actually reminds me of what a lot of senseis say, is that yai is completely encapsulated in one technique, which is Maya, and how, like, you just have to do that one and you'll understand everything in yai. And I find that even to a more narrow extent, Nukitsuke, once you kind of feel it and get it down in doing Nukitsuke and Maya, you feel like you can do Nukiuchi and in other ways as well, and it just feels natural. So in some ways, when you're struggling with one technique, I found, for me at least, if I just go back and work on Maya, somehow, like, the other techniques also improve.
And it's kind of like what a lot of sensei kind of say, like, you can do it. Oh, sorry, what I should say was a lot of people, particularly beginners who fall out of love of EI or out of Jodo, they only see the structure, they only see the rigidity and the fact that the book says this, therefore you must do that. But they don't realize that within what the book says, there's all this other dimension and aspect and layer of practice, and how we perform each movement. As you say, even just in the Nukitsuke, you can do that in a variety of ways which still fulfill the criteria of the Jakuganten, but it's elevating that simple technique by manipulating the timing and the feeling and all the other aspects that are in it.
So speaking of which, we were talking about how, or Sida said that if you just add vinegar to the egg, it kind of changes the flavor. So the next topic is actually flavor. So normally when we think about flavoring foods, it's like, you could be salty or it can be sour or sweet or whatever, but that's just one thing. But like, the really truly great dishes are ones that balance a lot of those different things, or provides, like, it's not all even, like there's spikes in ones or the other ones. So similarly, when we're watching a good demonstration of Budo, you could kind of see the difference between people. Like there are certain tastes that they have. And I think the term aji is used as well when you're watching that. So Sida, why don't you start us off with something? What did you choose for aji?
Yeah, the dish I chose was century egg porridge. And it's, I think from experience, it's like an acquired taste. Not a lot of Western people understand this 1,000-year egg concept, like these black eggs. So it's, I don't
This
want
is rotten egg, basically.
Sorry?
Is this the rotten egg thing that they kind of?
Yes, the rotten egg. Yeah, it's not rotten per se. I think it's been treated in some kind of base. Usually you wrap it up in straw and ash, so you get a basic environment around the egg, and it coagulates the proteins inside, and then you get these beautiful protein crystals on the outside of the egg white, which then now is black. So we also call it like the pine flower egg because of these crystals you get on the egg white. But what is both the disgusting part and the great part is the consistency. And when you cook it into a porridge, you're adding this sort of natural umami into the porridge, and it's just something like I find it's just interesting. And I mean, I love eggs and I love porridge, so this is like a really high-end gross food that you need to sort of understand the culture, and you have to have sort of some understanding of the food itself to appreciate. And for me, like this is sort of like explaining Yaido to people that aren't really into Budo. Like they just think, oh, you're just dressed in skirts and waving a sword around, but like I think it's, once you understand what it is and you've tried it a few times, and then you sort of realize the different nuances in the taste, and it's like watching an Eitan sensei. If you have some understanding of Yaido, you can sort of pick up these small things that they're doing, and sort of find it beautiful or powerful, or appreciate it in a way that somebody that doesn't really understand Yaido might appreciate it, or Jodo. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, it's funny because in Hong Kong you would see the century-old egg congee as a street food. So it's like one of the cheapest things you can get, and you can just walk up anywhere. But you can also see it at like high fine dining restaurants. It's like the same dish.
Yeah, it's not cheap to get them in Sweden.
I'd love to try it next time I'm in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Whenever that is.
And we need to find a way to smuggle black market 1,000-year-old eggs to Sida in Sweden.
No, we have them. They're just pretty expensive.
Can you make them yourself, those eggs, or does it take?
Probably. I've never looked up DIY videos. There's like this. I don't know if it's a myth, like, oh, you need horse urine to make because I think it's related to the ammonia for the base environment thing.
But it has to be horse ammonia, does it?
Sorry?
It has to be horse ammonia, does it?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Aurelien, you chose some kind of salmon dish.
Yeah, oven-baked dill and garlic salmon. This is a recipe I kind of found independently of my family and my parents. But it's just, it's very, very rich. It's got so many tastes going on in there. There's dill, there's garlic, there's lemon, there's the slight acidity of the tomatoes and the mushrooms as well. And again, it's a very, very simple and easy to make dish. You just put all the ingredients in some tin foil, close it, put it in the oven for 20 minutes on 180 degrees, and it's done basically. And it's so full of tastes that it kind of, but not too much. It's got that right kind of balance of variety of taste in a single dish, and the right is just some kind of standard fried potatoes and carrots. But if we sort of bring this over to EI and Joe, it's getting some not making your technique too crammed full of different kind of tastes and different kind of feelings, but and making sure that they all match and correspond with each other and agree with each other, so that to make a complex technique, again, combining it with some elevating simple techniques, if you can put all those into a single technique and do something a little bit interesting and different and inspired by your sensei, this other person that you admire, or maybe even this kohai who's doing something that is really quite nice, and sort of going beyond the simplicity of certain techniques or certain kata even.
Mm-hmm. So I just want to do a quick time check. We're scheduled to end in 1 minute. Do you guys want to end now or do one more?
I'm free.
Okay. So let's do. How about we're talking about IG, so it's kind of like the demonstration performance. So having a vision for the final creation before you even start. So in this sense, like we talk about, actually sports is the same thing too. If you're in a competition, you want to visualize yourself performing whatever you're doing. And in some cases, even visualize 3 flags going in your flavor, like visualize everything. And then when you go into it, you kind of already have that. So there's a similar kind of feeling in when you're making certain dishes, that you kind of need to know what you want to end up with before you start working on it. So Aurelien, why don't you start us off with your choice?
Well, I chose an apple crumble, which is a kind of very, it's another one of those recipes that I got from my mum, who's very good at it. Traditional British dessert, and you can have there's different varieties. There's apple crumble, there's apple and blackberry crumble, which is actually my personal favorite. We can also get rhubarb crumble, and so with this one, again, and this kind of applies to all the dishes I've learned from my parents, is that, I already have in my mind what it should be, what it should end up as, what the end product looks like and tastes like, and it's just getting there that is that I'm not sure how to do, or I'm still learning how to do. And this was another one where I said to my mum, how much of this and this and this do you put in? And she's like, I don't know. So there was another added challenge to making it. But it's a good way to not just myself, but generally speaking, if you, as you said, you've got a final product that can guide you towards how to get there. It can give you an idea of how to achieve that end result, and particularly for when you're preparing for shinsa, it helps to know, like, you can visualize your number being announced on the paper, the result on the successful passes, but you already have a kind of idea in your mind of what represents that grade or that level, and you can use that to base your own training and to inform how you feel when you go out onto the floor. You can also look at the other people that you'll be going up on the floor with, who'll be grading at the exact same time as you, and you think to yourself, "Oh God, this guy's really good. He beats me every single bloody Thai guy." So, but it can give you motivation to sort of change your technique a little bit, or to really sort of heighten your the effort that you're putting in, and the what's the right word? The precision that you're endowing your technique with, and the attention to every single one of your movements. It can really inform how much effort you put into that. And yes, we say that we should be doing that anyway, but one of the ways that we can get there is by having this visualization of the end product and going, okay, this is what I need to do. Then you can be precisely here. This is the exact speed, the timing, the feeling I want to give to that particular technique, and you can use that to change what you're doing, or to ensure that you're doing it.
So that sounds like something that's when you have the apple crumble, it seems like a very simple dish and simple recipe, but in this case, like, you know that if you had like more sour apples, then it would taste a little different. If you added the blackberries, it would be different. That's how kind of you look at, okay, what kind of crumble do I want to make? And then you know exactly what you need to change to do it.
Yeah, and same thing for the crust at the top. It's a combination of sugar, butter, and flour. And again, with that, if you want to make it a slightly more crusty and caramelized crust, you can add more sugar. If you want it to be more like a cookie type consistency, then you can add a little bit more flour, a little bit more butter as well, so you can adapt that to change the consistency. And as you said, if you're going to use blackberries, you're going to put rhubarb in there as well, or if you're just going to have apple, and you can pick the different kinds of apple as well to affect the final outcome.
Yeah, it seems like a really versatile dish too, and what you choose to put into it.
Yeah.
Cool. Sida.
Yes. So let's see. I picked let me just find what I picked. Yeah. So I picked oven baked salmon with pesto and feta cheese because it's one of the few dishes that I need to look up a recipe for to make. I think so. For me, it's anything that I don't really know how to do, I have to look it up, and then obviously there are pictures and the recipe, so you have this expectation of how it should be. And then this is one of the dishes that doesn't ever really turn out the way that I had visioned, because either the salmon would be like oddly shaped, and then the topping with the pesto and feta would like be melted all over instead of like in a neat layer on top. And then here I burned the pine seeds, so it doesn't look as nice. So that's, I guess, an example of having a vision and then not really achieving it, but then again be okay with it because you get nutrients and it doesn't taste that bad. So that's basically, every kata that you ever messed up is sort of this. You have the recipe of what the kata should be. You know how to turn on the oven. You know how to open a bag of pine nuts and fry them, but then either the temper is incorrect, like the temper is too high and everything gets melted, or things get burned. But you still learn along the way. So this is a vision of what I wanted to be, but didn't really turn out as I expected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, that's a helpful thinking too. Like whether it's performing a kata or going into a competition, having a set goal in mind would then allow you to look at the difference between what you expected and what actually happened, and then you can make that adjustment to adapt. But if you didn't have that view in the first place, you could just be like, why did I lose, or why did I fail, or why did this not work? It's much harder to improve that way.
I think for me, it's more, it's a bit cliche to say, it's the journey that is more important than in this case, the vision. I think the vision motivates you to do something, and then if it doesn't turn out, you've still had that experience. You still got to eat something, instead of starve.
Cool. So this has been amazing. I have one final question for you guys each to answer. So it's Ishiro Sensei's 100th birthday, and he decides to go to your house for a meal cooked by you. What do you make? You can take a few seconds to think about it.
My God, Christ. Oh.
I would make dumplings, I think.
Yeah. Force him to join you.
Like
he has to make it with you, because that's the experience.
That would be a good joke.
It's either dumplings or the 100-year, or in China, if you after a certain age you eat ramen or noodles for your birthday, because it symbolizes longevity. So in the best case, you would find a noodle that is one single noodle, but it fills up a whole bowl. So that's a symbol of longevity. Maybe if I learn how to make that, I'll probably make that.
Well, you have a few years to practice.
Yeah, he's got about a couple of decades to go, so we've got lots of time to think about that.
Aurelien, what would you make? Yeah.
I think mine would possibly be, it's a dish I'm actually not very good at making. I'm still learning how to make it, and that's a Swordfish Tagine, which I think there's a picture of somewhere. It's a traditional Moroccan dish.
I don't think you sent it.
Did I?
Oh wait, right here. There it is.
Yes. Unfortunately, I don't have a picture of it in the proper dish. I don't know if you've ever seen a tagine. It's got like an earthenware pottery base to it, and it's got a kind of tall, elegant sort of lid to it, and it's got a lot of interesting tastes. Swordfish also is not something that's eaten a whole lot, either in Japan or in France or in the UK. And got lemon and potatoes, green peppers, onions, garlic, a little bit of ginger in there as well. And it's cooked for about half an hour. And generally the guideline is that you cook it long enough for the sauce to reduce a little bit. So it's sort of a kind of a thick sauce. And starts out quite watery, but because you cook it so long, it sort of some of the moisture evaporates. And you eat that with bread, preferably like a baguette or something like that. So I think that I'm pretty sure he's never eaten this before in his life. So it would be a surprise for him.
Mm-hmm.
He also wouldn't expect me to make a Moroccan dish since I have no connection to Morocco. But yeah, I think that's probably what I'd do for him. And of course, my mum's chocolate cake.
Yeah, we actually. Here, let me just quickly show that one too, because you did put that in.
That's all. Actually, that's the fondant chocolat.
Oh no, yeah.
Which actually, now that you mention that, I might I'm not sure if I make that or if I'd make my mum's chocolate cake, but they're both equally delicious. Possibly that, actually. I think you might prefer that.
Mm.
Yeah, so it'll be a main course of tagine and then a dessert of fondant.
Cool.
That's my plan. No one release it to him. No one tell him.
All right. So this has been super fun. Thank you guys so much for doing this.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. And hopefully, if we come up with other ideas, we could potentially do this in the future. Other dishes, we did leave out a few, so it'd be fun. Maybe in a couple months or something. Otherwise, it'd be great to meet up sometime and have you guys cook for me. That'd be awesome.
It's a deal. We should all do take turns meeting up in Canada and Sweden and Japan or wherever I am.
A food tour. Yeah. And maybe a little training on the side. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you come to Sweden, we can try the fermented herring.
I am not touching that. Just throw me. It sounds disgusting. I'm never trying.
I've actually never tried it either, so it would be a good experience to actually experience it.
Or maybe I should try it just on a dare, just to say I've tried it. Because I've tried natto. It can't be worse than natto.
It's a lot worse than that.
Well, hopefully that doesn't require horse urine to also.
No, I hope not.
Don't give them the idea. Don't give the Swedes the idea of putting horse urine with it as well.
I think in Iceland they have this fermented shark. That's as well, right? That's also quite.
Yeah, my cousin told me about it. They put it in the ground. They piss on it. They put it in the ground for like 90 days, whatever it is, and then they eat it. Yeah, or they just give it. Apparently, no. They just, according to him, they just give it to tourists. So I think that's. I think there's something not quite right going on.
But it sounds like piss is the magical ingredient for pretty much everything.
Yeah, maybe that's where French cooking's been going wrong all this time. We just need some piss in our bœuf bourguignon.
All right, I'm not having that next time you cook it.
Make this with a secret ingredient.
Thank you guys so much. Well, it has salt in it, right? It's supposed to be a little salty.
Yeah, just a little bit though.
Yeah, and you can change it based on what you drink. Like if you drink a lot of water, if you drink coffee. All right. Okay, that's enough of that conversation. Cool. Thank you guys so much. Have a great day.
Thank you. Take care. Have a lovely one.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that episode because we have a lot more exciting conversations to share as we explore the world of the traditional Japanese martial arts. The Inside Look podcast is brought to you by our amazing patrons over at Patreon. If you are enjoying this work, please consider supporting me at patreon.com/Tokushikai Canada. To contribute to this effort, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at tokushikai.canada or subscribe to our newsletter at subscribe@tokushikai.ca. Until next time, thanks for listening.